Mickey has a real tempo, a real flow going on the history and geography class. I'm not going to mess with it. He'll be back next week. He'll pick it up. This week, I'd like us to take a look at one of the senior citizens in the Bible. If you got it, if you got the email this afternoon, you know that I've asked you to read the book of Ruth. We're going to talk about Naomi, the senior citizen. And if you're waiting for a piece of paper with questions on it, it'll be coming back up here shortly. So it'll come for you. How many of you got to read all 4 very lengthy chapters of Ruth? It's a pretty easy read, isn't it? I mean, it struck me as, wow, this flows real well too. And it's an easy one, I think, to follow. There's a lot in it, but it's very easy to follow. At what period? Well, there's Kaylee. Hey, Kaylee's here, up from Texas. It's an easy one to read, but there's a lot in it. And tonight, I'd like us at least first to focus on some of the things we can learn about and from Naomi. There are the paper questions coming around, so if you need one, raise your hand, and I bet Riley will do his best to get it to you. So, at what period in Bible history is this occurring? Oh my, I've been enlightened. So, the time of the Judges tells us that, doesn't it? In the first verse or two? Yeah, so that's the time. What's happening in the land of Judah? A famine. So, okay. So, this man whose name is, fill in the blanks. Yeah, or Elimelech. Yeah. You say, yeah. Okay. He and his wife, her name, Naomi, go to, I'm sorry? Moab. Yep. Moab. And why? Because of the famine, yeah. Assuming and hoping to find food there. So, under what circumstances do you suppose that famine occurred in Judah? Why? I know the text doesn't say, but putting together some things that we know about that period and the way the people conducted themselves, what might be an explanation?
It was one of those times where they weren't listening to God, he let somebody take them over.
Yeah. Remember, God's people were good for a while. They turned away. God would send a judge, try to straighten them out. Worked for a while. They turned away. So, probably makes sense that it was during one of those periods when they were not behaving as they should have, not regarding God as they should have, that this famine came upon them. So, at least that family went to Moab. They are there for a little while. Who would the they be? Elimelech and Naomi, we've already identified. Who else? Wait a minute now. Let's deal with the 2 sons first. Yeah. And now, those 2 sons married 2 Moabite women, one of whose name was Orpah, and the other. Okay, so usually when we get into this book, we focus on Ruth. And we might talk about her from time to time tonight, but Let's deal with some of the things we can see about Naomi first. Shortly after her husband dies, what else happened? I'm sorry? The sons die. So now she has lost a husband and 2 sons, and things don't look very good for her. So she decides, I'm going to have to go back, yeah, Bethlehem specifically, yeah, go home. So she has 2 daughters-in-law. What's the discussion between her and her 2 daughters-in-law when she tells them, I'm going back? A little bit louder, please. Oh, that's only one of them. Let's work our way to it. It was, yeah, it looked like they would. It looked like they would, but then
Naomi said, I don't have any husbands for you. I don't have anything for you there. Go back to your father's house.
yeah, she was pretty, blunt. She said, what am I supposed to do? At my age, get pregnant and raise up husbands for you? Not likely. She said, are you going to wait? And so they were going to go. One of them, Orpah, decided, I better stay here. But Ruth, in probably one of the most tender and touching statements, somebody turn and read it. It gets used elsewhere now, but or in other circumstances. But read it as Ruth first said it. Go ahead, Rob. You look like you want to.
For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. That was verse, 69.
So what kind of devotion is that from her toward Naomi?
She was close to her mother-in-law and she left her.
Excuse
She
me.
was close to her mother-in-law and she left her and she accepted her God.
Yeah. Wonder what kind of influence Naomi has had on her. Think about that for a minute. You know, I'm not going to go into mother-in-law jokes or anything, but how many times do you expect somebody's going to say, yeah, mother-in-law's moving, I guess I'll go with her. Matter of fact, I'll look forward to going with her. Doesn't that happen very often? No. So, what kind of influence has Naomi had on Ruth to bring that kind of a response?
She must have been a straightforward and upright woman, maybe a charming woman or a very...
Is everybody hearing? Very honest, straightforward, even charming. She has shown, obviously, some dedication to the Lord, because Ruth has said, your God will be my God. Your people will be my people. What's going on between the people of God and the Moabites? Where'd the Moabites come from anyway? We're descendants of... Who were the 2 daughters who got their father drunk and slept with him? Lot's daughters. And one of the daughters had a son whose name was... Moab. And the other one had a son whose name was Ammon. So recall the Moabites and the Ammonites throughout history. Okay? Anyway, so what kind of circumstance existed between God's people and the Moabites?
Well, the Moabites were idol worshippers.
Okay? True.
They warred with each other.
Yeah. They were at war with each other quite a bit. So think here, the influence Naomi must have had on Ruth, for Ruth to say, I'll leave these people who have been enemies of your God and people, and I'll return with you. Must have been some kind of influence. So they get back to Bethlehem of Judea, not to be confused with that other Bethlehem of someplace else, but Bethlehem of Judea. And they get into town, and the text describes the women as making comments to and about Naomi. And what kind of comment were they making?
Naomi's here, and Naomi says to them, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara,
Why?
because she was bitter. She was.
How did they know that? What prompted those women to say that? To say, is this Naomi?
Maybe they thought she was unhappy, displeased, and left.
Yeah.
She didn't trust enough in God, and she left. Instead of staying there and praying and believing, and maybe God would make things.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of discussion that does occur along those lines. People looking into it and saying, well, if Elimelech had not left, well, I got a lot of if statements too. No. But she does not look like they remembered her. She looks much worse for the wear, shall we say. And they're saying, this is Naomi? And then she says something like, don't call me Naomi. Call me instead Mara. Why Mara? What does Mara mean? Sorry? Bitter. Why that choice of words? She put it's in the text.
For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me.
Because God has dealt bitterly with me. And did that kind of feeling come about with any other? That's a bad way to word the question, I'm sorry. What other Bible character may have thought that way, or some friends tried to convince him that way? Job. Yeah. There was a feeling from time to time among the folks back then, if you mess it up, God's going to let you know. So she took on the feeling that God's doing this to me because somewhere along the line, I must have done something. So don't call me Naomi, because what does Naomi mean? Blessed. Yeah. She didn't feel blessed. She felt like she had been bitterly treated. And you can refer to me as bitter. Okay? So we move on a little bit. What did I miss? Anybody else want to comment on verses 19 through 21 of chapter 1? Yes.
Something that I heard pointed out one time, I don't know if it really means anything or not, but Naomi says, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, and then the scripture continues to call her Naomi. And so, it could possibly show that even though she felt that the Lord had dealt bitterly with her, the Lord was still with her.
Yeah.
And so there was no reason to change her name because God was still with her and was still providential in her story.
And we're going to see that, but good point to bring out, yes. Yeah, the townspeople, and one notably that we can see here in a few minutes. Chapter 2, where does Ruth find herself going? And to do what?
She came to Bethlehem in the beginning of the barley harvest.
I'm sorry, a little
She
bit.
came to Bethlehem to the barley harvest.
Oh, okay. Yeah, barley harvest was going on. Kim, go ahead with it.
Ruth went to a kinsman's field to glean from the leftovers.
Yeah. Everybody recalls what gleaning is all about and what it was about at that time?
We were supposed to leave some
Yeah.
left over so that the
Yep.
people in need could have it.
Did she pick that particular field to go to?
They were related to those.
But did she know that?
It doesn't seem like she does, but again, the word, this providence of God is
Exactly.
playing out throughout the
Yeah.
story.
It's the providence of God that she goes there. And we're going to see it unfold. So a little bit of time here about Ruth, but Naomi's going to still have a big play in this. Ruth figures, I got to do something to take care of myself and my mother-in-law here. So she goes into the field, happens to be the field of Boaz, and she gleans. Pretty honorable guy, this Boaz. What are some things he tells his workers, the men of his workers?
Do not harm her, do not give her a hard time, let her glean.
Don't bother her. That's going to come to play a little bit later. It's going to be an important consideration here in a few minutes, but don't bother her. Let her take as much as she wants, essentially. He's saying just treat her well. Gary, go ahead.
Well, one of the customs at that particular time, those who were wealthy would set aside corners, where they would
Right.
leave for those who were less wealthy to
Yeah.
come and gather them. So normally, you would find Ruth over there in that area, but Boaz says, no, let her go and get the better.
Yeah. He was being very kind to her, even though she was a Moabitess. Says a lot about him. But back to Ruth and Boaz and Naomi here. How much does she bring home? A simple description like a lot will be all right. She brings home a lot. There are specific measurements given in the text at times, but she comes home with plenty of grain. So she's being well cared for. Anything else major out of chapter 2 there?
Just a side note that he is related. You know, at that time, she doesn't know this.
Right, she doesn't know that yet.
But there's blood, there's a relative, he's a relative of Elimelech.
Yeah. Chapter 4 is going to become important, really important. For right now, he's being good to her. She's happy. She's able to provide for herself and Naomi. In chapter 3, here comes matchmaker Naomi. See what she does in chapter 3? She advises Ruth to take certain steps that will pretty much make it clear to Boaz that she's the marrying kind, to put it simply, several decades, centuries later vernacular. But some of those steps, what did Naomi tell Ruth to do?
Lay at his feet.
Well,
Get fixed up.
yeah. Some specifics, though. Look at the text.
At
See,
midnight, the man was afraid, and he turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. But Boaz hadn't eaten or drunk, so his heart was merry.
what are some things Naomi told Ruth to do? Some specifics.
To anoint herself, put on a cloak.
Get cleaned up,
Dress up.
okay? Put on some perfume. Some of the texts are going to use the word N-A-R-D, or that word's going to come up in the text. It has to do with the essence of some of the plants that smelled good. So she's giving her advice on how to make yourself attractive to Boaz. See that? Tells her to dress a little bit differently, perhaps, than she had been.
Your best garment.
And then we have this thing, and go to the threshing floor, and all of you who have said, lie at his feet, now say it. Lie at his feet. So what's the deal about that? What did that signify?
That she's honoring him.
That what?
She is honoring him.
It would be that. But it would also be a matter of there's property. Not a good word to use about a lady in these days, but that there is property that must be redeemed. Don't just think Naomi and Boaz and Ruth as we go through this. There are some parallels that we can make throughout Scripture, really, but most notably with whom? Redeeming Jesus. Okay? Jesus was our Redeemer. The term that's going to be in this text is kinsman redeemer. And in lying at his feet, she was telling Boaz, I need to be redeemed. I need to be bought. Okay? Custom of the time was the nearest kinsman redeemer had the first say in this. So Boaz, being a good man, is going to, and you have to realize and think that Naomi knew what was going on. She still knew family members and so on. So she's prepared Ruth, but Boaz has a part in this. Now we're into chapter 4, I believe. Boaz knows that he is not the nearest kinsman redeemer. He does not have the first opportunity to buy Naomi's property and also Ruth. So he has to arrange, or there has to be a meeting where he can offer to the nearest kinsman redeemer the chance that he deserves. So, out there by the gates of the city, Boaz has, early in chapter 4, how many elders of the city are at the gate there? 10. That's a pretty sizable number of witnesses, isn't it? And just by providence of God, who walks by?
The nearest redeemer.
The nearest kinsman redeemer. And Boaz said, whoa, come over here a minute. We got to talk. And he makes him aware of Naomi's property and wants to know, do you want to redeem it? What's his first response? Oh, yeah, I'll get it. But then Boaz says, and take Ruth. Uh-oh. No, I got to back out. Why did he want to back out now?
Because it would mess up his inheritance.
It would mess up his inheritance. What if he were to have sons a little bit later on? And what if he were to have sons by Ruth? Now there are going to be problems with dividing up whatever he would leave. So he says, the land would be nice, but I'm not going to marry Ruth. Not going that way. So, happy camper Boaz says, well, then let's make it a deal. And how did they seal the deal? What was the gesture that was done?
Shoes.
Shoe. Yeah.
It's interesting. When I was in Iraq, one of the things that you didn't want to have happen to you was somebody take off their shoes and start throwing them at you. Because that was a big no-no.
Yeah. Yeah. So, now Boaz has the property and, more importantly, has Ruth. So Ruth and Boaz get married, and they have a son, and the son's name is Obed. And Obed has a son, and probably way down there in the last few verses of chapter 4, we get that lineage there. A couple generations hence, who is born? Jesse and then David. And David becomes big king. Big king. So, I use that word too much. I gotta stop saying so. David becomes the big king from a very difficult beginning where Naomi has gone from, well, we left Judah, we came into Moab, things didn't work out, lost my husband, lost my sons, but I've come back, and God has worked through things with us, and here she is blessed. She is once again able to regard herself as Naomi. But how does she treat Obed?
Like her own son.
Yeah, I've looked at that and read it over and over, and I said, yeah, but this is Ruth's son, and here's Naomi taking all this care of him. So, brought some life back in, or some youth and vigor back into this grandma. Now, I'll never be a grandparent, but some of you are. Is that the way it works for you? As you get older and your kids have kids, does that make you feel young again? You go chasing them around the park or whatever you do? Oh no. Well, there's a no, but
The
You
grandkids
watch
do
them. It's watching.
so what does being a grandparent do for you?
It makes you happy.
It makes you happy. And isn't that what happened for Naomi?
But I think it also fills the emptiness too.
Yeah,
If you lost something or, you know, like she lost her children, she
Yeah.
lost her 2 boys, her husband, it filled that yearning or that hole that she was missing.
It gives you purpose. And that's what we all need, is purpose.
yeah. So there you are with my next question. What should we get out of this? What should we get out of this story, this account, with respect to Naomi, the things that happened to her?
She never gave up on God.
She never gave up on God, so
She just kept her faith.
she kept her faith, and because she did, lessons for us.
She was restored.
Influence of,
Kim?
she said, Ruth was influenced by Naomi. But I think we also see that Naomi was always cared for by God.
Oh, yeah,
He never gave up on her.
exactly. Yeah. Randy?
Well, this reminds me of one of my favorite Proverbs, 3 verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of Naomi's offspring. Several generations later wrote this.
Right. I think I put a passage on here I wanted us to look at. Oh yeah, back up there with matchmaker Naomi. In all that she did to help Ruth gain favor and attention from Boaz, she was looking out for Ruth. Turn to Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. You have it.
Philippians what?
2, verses 3 and 4.
Got it.
Yeah.
Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interest, but also for the interest of others.
Sound like somebody we've been looking at? Sound like one of the lessons we ought to take? You know, it's personified there in Naomi, but that teaching is throughout. Probably Sunday we'll talk about the perfect law of liberty, the royal law again. And what is that law?
Love the Lord your God with all your heart.
And
mind,
second,
strength.
and second part,
Love
love your neighbor as yourself. We're going to have some things to say about that Sunday. We're going to move through chapter 2 of James and some of probably most of chapter 3. But same kind of thing. You know, James wrote to his readers about keeping the perfect law of liberty, keeping the royal law. The King of Kings made that law. It was an Old Testament instruction. It's a New Testament instruction. Love your neighbor as yourself. Philippians chapter 2 there, think more highly of others than ourselves. And that's what Naomi did. Go ahead.
I think it's interesting that you were bringing out where Naomi was showing this in regard to Ruth and her position. But I think we see a cycle of this where Ruth was also showing this kindness to Naomi when she was bringing back what she gleaned. And I suspect that Naomi was showing it to Ruth during those years when her husband was no longer.
Yep. I would suspect the same. Yep. Yes, sir.
You made the observation a while ago that Boaz was a redeemer in the comparison to Christ, which is a very good observation there and a very good thing to pull out of that. The other side of that coin is Ruth. You could make an argument that she represents the church, because the church takes care of one another, as you pointed out here, that Ruth and Naomi are taking care of one another. The church bows down at the feet of Christ. He is our King. He is our Redeemer. We submit to Him. So if you want to we read Ephesians chapter 5, and sometimes we don't know what it looks like. We see it play out here in the book of Ruth, and it's beautiful. And as you said, and not only on top of that, but to bow down at the feet of Boaz. This is a time in the time of Judges where there was no king and everybody did what was right in their own eyes. But that's not what Ruth did. She did what was right by Naomi, and as such is a very, very good example for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Christ the Redeemer, comparison, Ruth the bride of Christ. Who's the bride of Christ? The church. So to your point. Yep. Comparisons. There are so many types and antitypes and all that throughout the Bible. Just have to look at them. Think things through. It's like I've said on Sunday mornings. Daily Bible readings, good thing, but you got to take time and get into what the book says. Bring the things out. I have a grandfather who was a coal miner back in the days when it was pick and shovel type thing. He did a lot of hard digging. And I've heard the term, it's not mine, but I've learned to use it. We have to mine the scriptures, get into them, dig in, see what they say. Someday somebody's going to be asking us some questions. They're going to be asking us some questions. He's going to be asking us some questions. I want to be prepared. I want to know what that book says. Because what am I going to be judged by? We only got about 3 minutes left. Take any comments?
You have to think about Naomi's faith too, because although she thinks God turned against her, Ruth learned about the true God through Naomi. Growing up as a Moabite, who knew about false gods, and she chose to follow Naomi's God, and in the end, he ended up blessing all of them.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the things that probably, in my view, prompted Ruth to say, I'll go with you. Your God will be my God, because she has seen God in Naomi. So we have to, watch the way we conduct ourselves. Make sure we do that in a way that would bring others to Go ahead.
This is just another incredible story, how God turns tragedy into blessing and to joy.
Right.
And that this plan of redemption passes through these lives. And just as Job experienced it, Ruth or Naomi experienced it. But again, it's been said before, but God has this plan, this providence of his working. In fact, God doesn't really mention that much in the book of Ruth, per se, but he's there. He's all over. But you don't see call or cry out in necessarily other than Naomi, feeling that she's been.
Yeah. What's the other Old Testament book that does not even mention God by name? Esther. Okay, yes, sir.
You could also take notice too here about the Gentiles being grafted in, because Ruth is certainly a Gentile, and she is not a Jew, but she is grafted in when Paul talks about that later on in the New Testament. And of course, we realize that she is in the lineage, and she's specifically called out by name in the lineage. So again, we see that God is not willing that any should perish, and that this is a prime example of that, maybe one of the first.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we're down to less than a minute. The kids will be coming up. So thanks for your participation. Be ready to hit the ground running next week when Mickey brings his tempo back, and you'll move on through the history and geography of the Bible.